Hey man,
Hello.
but here we
Yeah,
are at last after months of
yes.
back and forth. And
I know.
yeah,
I know. We've
yeah,
been wanting to do this for a while. I mean, I can't even
yeah.
remember.
Adish Ramdhanas. Did I get that right?
Adish.
Adish Ramdhanas. Yep.
There you go.
All right.
Yep.
82 and a half kg USAPL lifter, 2024 collegiate state champ in the weight class. Think you set the deadlift record there. No?
For CCB, I did.
Okay. Got it.
I'm not really sure what the state junior record is actually, but I'm assuming that it's over 300 kilos. So
Okay.
I didn't even check. I don't know. I don't know though, but I just don't really keep up with the state records that
Sure.
much.
Yeah.
But CCB record, right?
Nice. And that's the real record. That's what counts.
Yeah,
Name on the
yeah.
chalkboard. And you totaled 700 kilograms there, right? Which is a like almost a 20 kilo PR on the total from nationals. Is that right?
Yeah, almost. Yep. It was 17 and a half kilo PR. Yep. So
Nice.
that
And is
was,
that a 475 dots?
yep. I think I hit
Dude,
475 on the money or 470. Yeah, 475, I believe. Yeah.
nice.
Yeah, which
Very
was
good.
awesome. Yeah, we're getting closer to 500. So,
Yeah, that's the goal. And you had a battle with your coach,
yeah.
Evan. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, yeah. There's so much to talk about with that. So my coach, Evan, um, he is actually like a 70, what is it, 70, 74
74.
kilo. Yeah, 74
Okay.
kilo lifter. Um, but he had the intention of just doing states at 181. So he was competing against me. And he's my coach, he's my friend, and then now this added competitor to the list. And so uh I feel like I've talked to you many times about the way like I look at training when we're in the gym, but like I'm not a very competitive individual. Like um I feel like my motivations to compete or like to go on the platform is never for me to go there to beat somebody else, right? Um, but in this situation, uh, Evan was really egging me on for a long time. I mean, for months, like months upon months, kind of like just in my ear, like telling me how he was going to total this, how no one's gonna beat him unless they do this, blah blah. Like his big thing that he would say is like, no one's gonna beat me unless they squat 600. So I was like, I need to squat 600, and I soon realize how far that really was. But anyways, um, it was an interesting like prep because I had never experienced that where like I kind of had like not only the mindset of like what I wanted to do, but like just having a competitor, like somebody that wanted to beat me and it made me want to beat them. It mainly was um like Evan had a way of just like talking to me about his lifts that like made it sound like he was so far ahead of me. Like he was very, very far ahead of me. For months he was talking about like, he was gonna total like 720 on like a bad day. And I was like, you know, that's 720 for me would be a huge stretch on the day. Um, so I learned a lot. I learned a lot during that prep because it's really easy to get in your head of like what you feel like you need to hit and like these numbers that you're like shooting for in a prep because like everybody has like when you're like preparing for a meet you have these numbers in your head that you're like aware that you're probably going to hit, right? And then you might have a number that you really want to hit, but it's like more in that space of if it happens or if something really great happens in training, like um there's like those realistic, on track, this is for sure what I'm good for on the day. And then there might be like those numbers that you are like, I really want to hit this so I could do this, blah, blah, blah. And I had to really like pick a balance of like the way I approached my training because I would get in my head of like, oh, if I don't hit this number, then I probably won't beat Evan. Um, with the squatting 600 thing. Um, and then like this the CCB board as well, like that was like, that's like a not really a I would say like a low-hanging fruit, but I mean, I since I started going to CCB, I've been looking at those numbers and like to just have my name on the board is like really, really special to me, considering my background that I'll go into and just like how much I've grown in training. But yeah, like the number on deadlift forever was 628, and I was like, I know I can hit more than that, and it's gonna happen this meet. Um, but yeah, the prep was really interesting because I had never kind of had somebody in my ear like that, like egging me on and kind of Evan never like talked bad about my lifts. He just talked about his lifts so highly that it like pushed me out of scope of his competition in a way. But as it got closer and you're like 6 weeks out, 4 weeks out, then the realism hits of like, what I knew all along that it was going to be very close between me and him. And that's what ended up happening. I mean, the day came down to the last deadlift.
Wow.
Um, so yeah, I mean, um, he he missed. So I always told myself it's like I knew that it's a the viewers don't know like Evan Hawk has the crazy bench. He has like the 74 kilo American, I think it's like the open American record on bench, 457. But I mean, he's hit 463, 474 in training plenty of times. I was for sure that he was going to to hit more. Or I was for sure that he was going to break his own record at the
Yeah.
meet because in training I had seen him smoke 463 with very good pauses and control. So I was like, dang, like if he goes 6 for 6, if he hits his third bench, chances of me winning are very slim. He missed his third bench. And when that happened, I knew immediately what was about to happen. Like I knew in the warm-up room, I'm like, it's about to go down. And I was with um one of my best friends, Dawit. He was there. He competed the day after, but he was just helping. He wasn't even helping handle. He just was in the back with me for the mindset factor. And like me and him, we really, which I'll go into talking about more later too, but him and I really have had a journey together in training and like uh we both kind of knew how much this these moments meant for me um leading up to just a final deadlift, right? And like a quote that I'll never ever forget that he told me in that moment, which is like the way I look at it too is like it really resembles the way I train and all of this, but he told me if it's a war of attrition, I'll never lose,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
So when it came down to a deadlift, right? It's like it doesn't matter like it was like a it's powerlifting. We're not beating each other up. It's not like a boxing match where it's like real attrition where people are just blindly slugging at each other.
Yeah.
But uh the intensity of that moment when you're like, I was waiting there about to go out for my third deadlift. Evan was doing his third and then he missed his third. And then like everybody in the back was just looking at me, and like my friend was like, I'm like fully out of it with my music, whatever, and I'm just
Yeah.
like focused, and my friend's like, hey, 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 hey. Dawit was like, if you hit this right now, you're gonna win. He was like, if it's a war of attrition, you always win. And I'm like, okay. So I just went out there and did it. And I mean, we were all like sobbing afterwards, like me, Dawit, Evan, because especially, for Evan, like he's seen me grow so much as an athlete, strength wise, uh, mentally, as like how I treat myself as a competitor, like stepping up to the plate was a big thing that moment meant for me, right? Like when you are like down to the last lift, and it wasn't even necessarily, I wasn't even had that much pressure to beat him for that lift, but more so that deadlift would secure me a 700 kilo total, which is what I came in on the day to do no matter what. If I left there with a 697 and a half, it would have been hard for me to come out of there like ecstatic as I
Yeah.
was. It would have been great. I'm not gonna say I wouldn't have been grateful for it, but the 700 kilo total was what I went there for. Like that's what I went there for. So that was more so of like the pressure. And the way I looked at like training going into it and everything is, and I'll talk about it more in detail, but it's just like I looked at the competition between Evan and I as the second thing, right? Like
Hmm.
if
Yep.
I beat him, great. If I don't, doesn't matter. I just want a total 700, at least
Yeah.
700. If I beat him on the way, so be it. That'd be great. So it just added I would say it just added like extra spice to the competition. And being it was like my last collegiate states that I could do, um, it's a great privilege to be able to compete with a bunch of other collegiate athletes and people who are like the same age, same strength, kind of like field, and it was a lot of fun. Um, yeah, yeah, I'm not sure.
One thing that sticks out to me is just clearly you are motivated by having like an internal locus of control. The competitiveness with Evan was just kind of this secondary thing to you, and you had a number that you knew was challenging but attainable potentially if you had made the right calls and had the right day. And you were you were motivated by doing what you could, and as
Yeah,
opposed to uh factors that were outside of your control, i.e., whether Evan missed his third bench or not.
yeah,
Yeah. And so did you go 9 for 9?
yeah. I went 9 for 9.
Man, that's great.
Yeah,
That's great. Yeah.
yeah,
I think that anytime there's a close battle like that, it seems like it comes down to the person who can make all their attempts. Even if they
100%.
have two and a
Yeah,
half keys in the tank, it's like if you miss one, you're slipping behind. So
yeah, 100%. Yeah. I mean, like you said, it's even if you have keys on the tank, right? Like I would say on deadlift, I maybe had 2.5 or 5. It was pretty hard, and I didn't
yeah.
feel really great that day. On squat, though, was the biggest surprise because my training going into the competition for squat was just kind of all over the place. I had failed, I actually failed what I hit at nationals in April. Like going into it, I failed 562. So I failed to match my PR in the gym,
Hmm.
which sucked. I mean, like that's just like a total confidence killer. Because you train for months and then you finally get to load up some weight that is like up there to try to PR, and I just failed it miserably. So, and then I had taken like two other squats around 250, and they were very challenging, very, very hard. So we knew that I was stronger. It just was a matter of displaying it was really it just was hard. With programming and just like the predictability of like showing up strong on the day. So that's why as well, when I look at these competitions, I really don't like to say I am going to hit this number this day because I just don't know. I can do everything I can, um, but at the end of the day, it's just how strong I show up on the day. And there's a certain level of control that you can have as like yourself, like you're talking about like an internal what is it, locus of
Locus
control?
of control.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I try to let go of like the really strong expectations of what I'm gonna be good for. Um and on the day I was pleasantly surprised that I loaded 2.5 over my PR, right? So I loaded 567. Um and it flew like a
Yeah.
second attempt. I mean, in the video, you could just see how like surprised I am. I just like bursted out, like laughing almost, like I was
Yeah.
smiling and laughing because I walked that out and I was going into the hole readily prepared to just all out grind for my life
Yeah.
because the only other time that I had loaded 255 was when I failed it in the gym, and then when I hit it at nationals, that bar like stopped, and I
Yeah.
was like fully like grinding out every centimeter. So for me to just blow it up like that was like that set the tone for me for the rest of the meet, where I was just like, oh my goodness, like the squat I was definitely the most nervous for because I just had no backing in my training to know how I was gonna feel. And I didn't feel good on the day. I was like, my knees were sore, my quads were sore, but that was something, we trained me into the meet instead of doing a traditional taper. Um, because what we saw happen with my 562 at nationals, it was much harder than it was in the gym. Um, and we were like, okay, that's might be indicative of that I would feel better if I was more trained, and that's exactly what happened. Like we trained into the meet and I felt sore. I didn't feel strong. I was like not really feeling like how some people are like, I feel on right now.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
like um I didn't feel that at all. I just felt like I'm just gonna come in and squat whatever I can. And it ended up being great. So that gave me very high hopes for my goals um for nationals this year, which we'll talk about later. Um,
I did want to ask you as far as sort of carrying some fatigue into the meet. It seems like from a little bit of what I've heard about your training approach with Evan, uh, it reminds me a lot of like RTS emerging strategies, where you're kind of looking at what produces within a microcycle the best outcome on like your primary day, and then applying that without necessarily being beholden to some idea of linear periodization or percentages. Like you were telling me before nationals, I think that you hit like a tempo squat 2 days before your primary day or something like that,
yeah, that's what I
and that's
always
just
do.
like fuse you up, which I think that there would be some who may dogmatically oppose that for fear of
Right.
having heavy legs, or the kind of like uh abstract idea of CNS fatigue, and like what does that
Yeah.
really mean, like
Yeah.
uh but yeah. And so have you seen, as you've worked with Evan, like with each meet, have there been things like that where you've picked out and said, okay, hey, I don't need to, I don't want to show up flat, on meet day. So I'm going to carry a little more fatigue,
Yeah.
but maybe be more technically precise. Like how does that process work for honing your approach?
Yeah. So let me think. I've done, how many competitions? I've done four. I think States was my fourth competition with Evan. or third. Might have been third. Um, but yeah, with each one, we learn a lot and we kind of take so for specifically for this one, you just mentioned a great point was the tempo squat. When we were going into this states meet, we didn't do any tempo squat. We did a heavier secondary day to where I was doing a top set of four paused and then like some percentage back downs that were paused as well, but much lighter. But the top set of four would be progressed weekly, just like my primary lift. So at the end of the week, I would be hitting. I mean, like I ended up with that sort of structure. I hit 496 for four paused, which was like really great. And
Yeah,
that
that's a good set.
that actually happened um because the way we had that structure before it was like my primary squat was Monday and then let's say my that pause day might have been like 2 days or three days later in the week and I had failed the 562 on that week and then I came in 3 days later and I hit the 496 for four paused which I had failed or I had hit 496 for four like as a regular set a while ago, but that fourth rep like took the soul out of me. So
Yeah.
I hit 496 for four paused at what I would say like a nine. So it was like, okay, I'm definitely stronger. Like when that happened, I was like, I'm definitely stronger. But to get back to what you were asking, we took out the tempo squat, all that prep, and we kind of had an inkling, him and I talking about stuff like, hey, like, my squat was going really well going into nationals, and it seems like that tempo squat might have something to do with it. We didn't implement it until after the meet, or we may have no, I apologize. We did it like 2 weeks going into the meet or something. We like kind of ran the structure that I did going into CNATs. I believe. I believe we did do that. Um, but I was under like so much fatigue from pushing. It was basically like pushing 2 days of the week squatting. Um, that I was scared. I was like, man, I don't know if this fatigue is actually even gonna brush off in three. It was a whole block. I think it was like 3 or 4 weeks of running that. But the tempo squat does something to me that we realize, especially now after the meet, that we just went back to what worked going into collegiate nationals. And I feel like what this is the first question you might think of asking, and what anybody would naturally ask is like, why would you change it, right? If it was working so well going into nationals, like just for perspective, in nationals, I hit 562 squat, I hit 255. That was a 22 and a half kilo PR from November. So
Wow. Yeah.
so I had hit like 513 in November and then I hit 562 in April.
Wow.
So it was like a 4 month prep. What is it? December, January, February, March, April. Yeah. So like essentially like a 4 month prep. And I wouldn't say that like in those 4 months I added 22 and a half kilos to my squat. I think the strength was there maybe for a while. I mean, I definitely got stronger with that block. Um, but like um, the first question I ask is like why would we even change it if it works so well going into nationals? Well, you know, the way that structure worked was that I have one primary day and then two, so like a secondary and tertiary squat day where I'm like barely touching weight, right? So the secondary day is that tempo day where the max load I'm gonna touch in a whole block is like 190 to 200 kilos for a tempo single. And then the third day, I don't go over three reds. I do three reds for like a set of three and then I just on both those days I do back downs with like around two reds, like two sets of seven with like 286, and then the other day is like high bar with 254, right? So the heavy exposure is not there. The volume is kept up
Mhm.
on those days, but the heavy exposure isn't there. Um, and Evan was right in saying like I needed something more to drive strength. And
Mhm.
that pause squat day drove my strength. It did. It just didn't allow my like top end to really show. So we learn those things because of those competitions, right? So that's why it's like important, even if you don't feel strong, which is like something I talk to people about. It's like you might never really feel like strong to do a meet. You might not be good for like a PR total, but it's kind of good to have those little checks to see what's working and what's not in your
Mhm.
training, um, which is something I realized along the way. Um, because you can hit these extraordinary gym lifts, and then when you go out on the platform, it could be a whole different ball game. And that's a frustrating feeling. I mean, I've had that happen to me where I hit these really great lifts in the gym and I just can't seem to put it on the platform. That's like my number one pet peeve with like powerlifting is like I once that happens so much, you just learn like I do not want to even care about PRing in the gym. I just want to PR on the platform. Like I
Yeah,
don't care what happens in here, right? Because
right.
get so happy of like hitting these great lifts in the gym, but then when you can't put it on the platform, it's like you're not getting to enjoy it, right?
Yeah,
Like
you're kind of not ratifying that strength. I mean, like if you're a competitive power lifter, I mean, if you're just a dude who's maxing out, that's great. But within
exactly,
the
yeah.
standards of the sport of powerlifting, you're right. It doesn't matter outside of competition. So
Yep,
you're setting
exactly.
yourself up for disappointment if you
Yeah.
hit a grinder, RPE 10 deadlift with questionable lockout or something in the gym, and then you claim that and then you're just going
Yep,
to be let down whenever you drop it, at the meet.
yep,
Yeah.
exactly. But yeah, we have a good way of going about things where it's like pretty fluid. I don't offer a ton of input on the powerlifting programming aspect because I don't have the knowledge in that.
Mm.
I know it. I just know like um I never really put a lot of time into researching it on my own. I have a general idea of what a block should look like and
Mm.
what I should and shouldn't do. But when it comes to the intricate things like moving around certain days, certain rep ranges, I know some, and I've talked to Evan about it too, and he's like, "Oh, it's, a lot of the times it's really not that deep of an issue, like choosing 7 or 8 reps on a
Mm.
lift. Like, okay, like we're really getting down a
Yeah.
silly rabbit hole here. Like, oh, why am I have a 2x7 and not a 3x4 or something? Then there's like maybe some things there with like uh you know, there's different tactics on a coach's head of like, maybe limiting the amount of weight somebody is doing. They might give you higher rep range, but at the end of the day, it's just volume. Like volume is volume. And shoot, I might be wrong saying that too. Maybe there's more to volume than there is, but in my experience, uh, I don't like really tell him too much on like what to do programming wise, but I give him a lot of feedback of how I feel.
Mm.
So he's very responsive to that. And I think every meet we've came out of it doing something like a little different. Like we learned something a little different.
Yeah.
Um, and that's been like the theme with my bench has been really, really, really shooting. Like it's just my bench has just like been continuing to just like it's not stopping. Like it's just
Yeah.
really starting to feel like a really good lift to me. Um, and it's just something I've struggled with for a while. And that was like one of the first things that Evan addressed. Was like, okay, we need to get we need to get your bench up. And every meet, we kind of learn these little things of like how predictable I am for like what I am on the platform, what I'm good for on the platform. I mean, he with him handling me, and then like when I had my previous coach for about a year, I had that coach. Um, I mean, I've only missed two lifts in competition.
Wow.
Yeah. Which my coach Evan, he brought that up to my attention after states because he'll just open powerlifting when he's bored and just look at people. And then he was like, wait a second, Adesh has only missed two lifts ever in competition. And I was like, yeah, that I'm never really, which I don't like to say I'm never concerned about this, but I I usually feel pretty confident in myself that I'm gonna go 9 for 9, and that's not because of me. It's just because of like the decision making on Evan's side of like he's very. That's like one of the main reasons I hired him as a coach. Is because he makes great calls on the day. You know, he made the calls for me to beat him. So
I was tucked that away to ask you about that, but yeah, that's pretty cool.
yeah,
And it's got to be such a positive feedback loop to know that you can trust yourself and trust, the attempt selection on Evan's part. So you walk onto the platform and you don't have this doubt, like, well, I missed my third last time. It's
yeah,
like you have this body of work that proves that you can consistently make the attempts.
right, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And you don't, that voice of doubt is turned down quite a bit for you.
yeah. Every third attempt on squat is never
Yeah.
is a very loud voice in my head.
Okay. Yeah.
Uh, I walk out there scared, man. I mean,
Yeah.
but I've like justified my third attempts in a way where it's like I go out there scared but confident.
Yeah.
So, um, so before this meet that I just had, every third squat I did on the platform, I've hit in the gym. So
Oh, okay.
it was very much like it was like, I look at I'm a chemical engineering major. I like to look at just the sometimes just the plain math of it, right? Even on my worst day or like the worst meet I had, um, I my third attempt was what I hit in the gym, was the best lift I hit in the gym. We were expecting me to taper and be much stronger, but because of me having to do some uh extreme cutting tactics, i.e., I had to take laxatives. Um, I felt terrible on the day.
Yeah.
It was unprecedented. Like that competition was like just like a so that's an interesting meet for me to talk about because I really beat myself up about it for a while. As far as like I felt like I did terrible. I felt like I did so bad, but it really was I just from the first nationals I did, and then I did that one, that competition in the fall. I just my total went down 2.5 kilos. That's all that happened, right? But I had like this is a competition I would actually like to talk about when I go into more of like my training philosophy and stuff because it was a pivotal moment for me in the way I approach my training.
Well, hey,
But
let's just jump into it then. We don't
okay,
know.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Let's follow
sorry.
the trail. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's circle. This is just last year fall. So around not last year, 2023 fall. Um so I had just finished my first nationals meet. Um I had very big goals and ambitions for my next meet, which was in November. This was a meet in Miami, the Ghost Fall Fest. And my primary thing was like, okay, I had just came off of nationals. I I had just seen what it's like to be at a national meet and be with these like really big competitors, these guys with super high energy competing against each other, and I wanted to be a part of it. Like I wanted to understand what it felt like to compete against other people. Every competition I had ever done was for myself to just go out there and hit these numbers and hit the total that was like for me, but I never looked at competitions as like actual competitions to win a weight class, to beat other people, right? To look at it as like a as like that whole other aspect of like I'm showing up so that I win, right?
Mhm.
So we picked a competition in fall in Miami, and there was like these other people who were similar strength as me, and it was like I looked at it as like this is my chance to like prove myself, right? Like this is my chance to like step up, compete against other people. These guys are like maybe a little more established in powerlifting. I want to like just show up and beat these guys, right? Um, and I went into training with like staring on my phone, every day, like seeing what they're hitting also. And I'm like, oh, like it was very motivating. But it was also very like debilitating because when my lifts didn't go the way I wanted them to go, which is natural in powerlifting, you don't, or any sort of strength training or any, or just life, things don't go the way they want to go all the time. I would be really like upset at myself because I was like, man, like for example, that nationals that I had just came off of. In prep for that, I had pulled 606 in the gym. Um, I did not hit that on the platform. I hit 578 on the platform. So I was like pretty upset for that nationals. I was like, man, I really wanted to deadlift 600 pounds because I hit that in the gym. That was like the first time that had happened to me where I didn't hit something that I hit in the gym, right? So then Ghost comes around. I'm like, okay, well, I'm definitely gonna hit 600 at this meet. That's my own. That was like, I need to hit at least 600, or more. That number on the CCB board was 628 before I replaced it with 644. My goal was to beat 628 or like to match it.
Mhm.
Um, and in training, I had some 600 plus pulls that all like slipped out of my hands, which was like really frustrating because I would be like, "Oh, I'm strong. Like I'm strong for this." There's just like little technical issues. At that time I pulled sumo as well. And um anyway, fast forward, get to the competition. Trained very light that time. That semester was a really, really hard semester for me with school, and I didn't take my diet seriously, and probably not hitting my protein every day, not recovering well because my sleep was pretty poor with school. Um, I would say on average I was like 6 hours of sleep a night, which isn't terrible by any means, but supplement that with like kind of poor eating. I never really felt too great. And
Yeah.
I find now like I feel good when I'm in like the 7 to 8, but as soon as I get to like 5 to 6, I start to feel like my sleep bank towards the end of the week kind of like really start to beat me up.
Yeah.
But anyway, those are the kind of like that was like the kind of attitude I had going into the meet, right? So I wanted to change the way I looked at prep. I aimed to look at it as I want to beat these people and I want to go to this competition and win. So I end up my scale was messed up or something was wrong with my scale, or I also just probably did not have very good control over my weight, and I essentially like ended up being like 189 the night before
Oh,
the meet.
wow.
Yeah. So I was like 180, I was like 183, 184 all of prep. And I drive down to Miami. I'm staying at my parents' home. I weigh myself before bed. I'm like, all right, well, I'll probably just have to like spit in the morning. And I see 189. And I'm like,
Oh my
holy
gosh.
crap. So I text my coach and he goes, go to the store, buy magnesium citrate right now.
Dude,
And
that'll do it. That'll clear you out.
yep. And I was like, okay, I buy the bottle and I'm like, it says to only drink like half of it or like a quarter of it. And he's like, nah, drink the whole thing. And I'm like, all right. So I spent that whole night cleared out. Like I was like simultaneously like on the toilet with a cup spitting as well to get all the water out. And it worked. I made weight. I spit all the way up to the moment I weighed in and I was like 82.4 on the
Wow.
dot. What the cost of that was me feeling miserable.
Yeah.
And literally like the laxative was still in my system while I was competing, which was I don't even need to tell you how bad that was. I'll spare you the
That's another
details of
level of
that.
doubt you don't want on your last squat, walking
Dude,
on the
the comp
platform.
like every time I like unrack the squat and I'd brace, I'm like, I can't brace because I'm gonna just explode right
Yeah.
here.
Um,
So that meet was what offered us like the really good statistic that so in my meet prep I hit 513, but Evan was expecting me to get a lot out of a taper, which could have been the case. Maybe I would have shown up strong. I had a lot to show up that I was gonna be stronger than that. I should have been good for like a 523 is what we were planning for. Um, and I showed up, I felt terrible. I mean, my second attempt was 501 and it was a grind. It was really like a grinder. And then, for that, Evan went up to just 513 and I hit it. Um, and that, like, that piece right there after the meet, after much time, it was like, okay, we realized that whatever I hit in the gym, I'm for sure gonna hit at the platform. Because even on a day where I shouldn't even be able to like squat anything. I mean, I remember Evan saw me in the warm-up room hitting 419 and he was like, "Are you all right?" And I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, I'm good, I'm good." But he could tell right off there, just with three reds and a green, he was like, "Oh, there's something." Like I definitely looked off
yeah.
and I felt off, but I was still able to match my heaviest squat in the gym. So that's like little pieces like that become really important. You know, that was like in hindsight, like man, that meet sucked. I didn't PR my total. Um, I didn't hit a 300-pound bench, which is what I really wanted to do too, because I had hit 308 in the gym. Um, I hit 297. That was the same bench I hit at nationals. So I hit the same squat I hit at nationals. I hit the same bench I hit at nationals, and then I regressed my deadlift 2.5 kilos. So I couldn't even pull six. But by the time I got to deadlifts, I'm like, all right, squat went bad, bench went bad, but I'm here to deadlift, right? I'm here to deadlift 600 pounds. That's what I came here to do. And it just wasn't there. I failed. I couldn't even get my third deadlift off the ground. So that's one of the two misses I have had in competition, and that one hurt so bad to miss. But yeah, I just wasn't strong on the day. Also after that meet, I I switched to conventional um, because I was sick of pulling sumo. Um, Sumo for me was like a fickle tail. I don't even know how to.
Yeah.
It's like I would have these days where I felt like just incredibly strong, but my technique had to be so precise. As soon as anything was thrown off, it was terrible. It just felt
Yeah.
terrible. Any slight thing, if my feet were just a little too open, or maybe I set up a little too wide or a little too narrow, it was very, and then some, and what would start to happen too is like I would finally find a groove in one move in one space, and then it just would feel weak after a while, or like I would have to feel like I had to change it.
Huh.
And it was like a back and forth between Evan and I. He'd be like, "Oh, adjust this, adjust that," and then it would show up really good. And then my body wouldn't be able to maintain that technique as much practice as I wanted to get. And my conventional was mindless. I had pulled just as much as I ever had sumo conventional. Um, like for a long time, I had trained both of them, and I still did with Evan. Um, I wasn't taking any like one rep maxes, but when I first in my like first year of powerlifting, I would just have like these one-off days pulling conventional where I felt like I caught lightning in a bottle, and I would just be like, all right, I'm gonna load up whatever I can, and it would end up being like 2.5 keys away from my sumo max. So I always
Wow.
knew that my conventional was like up there. And then the mindlessness factor was like a huge thing for me because I was like, I can just do this without thinking. Um, and that's what I need to do on the platform. Like I can't go
Yeah.
out on the platform thinking, oh, are my feet in line or this. And that's not to like, um, can I curse on here?
Dude, of course.
Okay,
Yeah.
I was like, that's not to like really shit on any sumo pullers that, I wish I literally sometimes still kind of wish that I could like stick out sumo, but it's just so frustrating for me. And my conventional just had like incredible success that um like very fast that I was like, there's no really point in me like battling. Like it was just such a mental game in the gym and then on the platform. But the main thing I want to take away from that competition, so when I was saying like how this kind of changed my perspective and stuff on my training philosophy. So I went into that competition with this like expectation and this desire to beat these other guys. I wanted to go in there and win first place and just beat other people. That was my goal. My goal was not to go out there and hit a certain total. Um, I just like I was like whatever I need to do to just beat these guys, right? I wanted a competition. I wanted like a heated all out battle kind of thing. Um, and when I couldn't squat what I wanted to squat, when I couldn't bench what I wanted to bench, and I just knew I was feeling weak, like I was already mentally checked out by by like my second squat. When I hit 501 and I was like all out grinding for it, I was like I was already like mentally checked out of the meet. And then I really beat myself up afterwards. Like I was like really upset, feel like I wasted all this time training and all of this. And that was all due to the result, after a lot of reflecting, that was just all due to the result. All of that was the result of me just really only being there to beat other people. My motivation and training for months was for other people, was to beat these guys. And um, I kind of realized it's like after that, it like solidified my view of training that so I before that competition I had really looked at training as like, I like to step in the gym and just train. Like I like to take the day by day, do the things I need to do on a daily basis, track my macros, get my steps and cardio in, build a physique, like I like those things. I really like those things. and I like to see where it'll take me. Whereas I tried to change the way I looked at training as it being like I want to be a competitive power lifter where
Mm.
I'm gonna come in and I just want to stomp and beat people. And it just didn't work for me. And that the result of that meet was me not PRing my total, not because of the way I looked at training. I just didn't show up strong that day,
Yeah.
right? But it made the result feel 10 times worse than if, I just had looked at training, if I had just prepped into that meet like any other meet, where it's just let me go out there and do what I can do, right?
Yeah.
The result of that hurt me so much worse because I had this expectation of going there and this pressure. It really was a pressure that I put on myself that I had to go there and beat these guys. And I learned very quickly from that it just really doesn't work that well for me.
Yeah, I
Uh
mean, you're scrolling Instagram to see what somebody else has posted, and you're more focused on their lift than what you need to do to execute what you need to make happen on that day. And it sounds like you very much flipped from this like process oriented mindset to like an outcome oriented mindset. But again, an outcome
yep,
oriented mindset based on factors that you can't control. You can't control who shows up on that
yep,
day and what they're ready to do. It's just um all you can take care of are the boxes you're capable of checking for yourself. So,
yeah. And that was like a big thing. It's like I learned that from that meet, right? I was like
yeah,
I told myself that for me to be great at powerlifting, for me to be competitive, I need to look at training like this. I need to look at it as me going into competitions and wanting to beat people.
yeah,
I was like, I need to change the way I look at training. That's what I kept telling myself. And it just wasn't me.
yeah,
It just simply wasn't me. I mean, after that meet, I was like, okay, well, I almost felt like because I have a lot of friends that have been powerlifting for a while, longer than me. Um, and like to them, it's like I don't know if trivial is the word to describe it, but it's more so it's just like, welcome to powerlifting. You just did a meet and didn't PR your total. Like
yeah,
you just try training another year and not PRing your total, right? Like try training 2 years, 3 years, not PRing your total and
yeah,
continuing to show up, right? And I'm sitting here pouty over like six six months of training and I didn't PR my total. Um, Meanwhile, I have friends, it's like 2 year battle, 3 year
yeah,
battle of doing that. So I felt like that was a very like it allowed me to mature a lot and it just really like solidify the way that I looked at training as being like right for me
mm,
and not trying to like force myself to think differently. Um I found myself after that, I was like, well, that meet sucked. I'm not gonna look at nationals as like some redemption meet. I'm just gonna train. And like the day by day of training was what made that like 4 months just be the best prep of my life. Because I had no idea where my squat was gonna go. I had no idea I was gonna squat 562 in 4 months. That weight was not even in
yeah,
my like, realm, right? Like the yellow was the green, just 529 was
hmm,
like
yep,
seeing four reds and a green on a bar to me was still just like monster weight for me to look at. Little did I know in like 2 months I would be taking that as like a last warm up, So it was
yeah,
like um I had to really, you know, I'm like thinking about it now, like I had to really, really try to just bring myself back to my what I like to call is like my reminders, right?
mm,
That's what I like to say is like Every day I train, every week every time I go to the gym, I try to, you check your boxes, right? Did you eat enough food? Or maybe you didn't eat enough food. Maybe you just like have enough fuel in yourself to get through it. Are you hydrated? Maybe, you know, did you bring like you check your boxes, did you bring your equipment, all these things. And then another box I like to check is like, do you have your reminder of
Mm,
why you're here, right? Do you have something to remind you of why you're doing this, right? And that's where I kind of went back to my roots. Um, and I stayed there ever since then. Like after that meet, I just stayed in my roots of like the way I look to look at training as very process oriented. I like to go in, do the day in and day out. I find joy in just the little things of just like doing the damn thing, of like going in and training and it just being like a daily thing without the pressure or thought of where that may lie 4 months from now
yeah,
or like what numbers I'm gonna hit, right? It's like a very it's a very scary game to play, of like there's a balance between like setting goals, um, and then there's like chasing these numbers for a certain time frame. Uh,
absolutely. Yeah.
and I don't know, I don't even so I hate to say that I don't like have any goals set.
Mm,
Um, like I have numbers in mind that I want to hit for nationals, but
yeah.
like I try to lose any sort of attachment to that.
Do you
Because I don't
focus?
want that, yeah, I don't want it to tarnish the experience for me if I don't hit a certain number. It's so arbitrary. It's
Yeah.
just, you know,
Do you focus then more on like, are you setting more of a short-term goal? Like at the end of this block, I want to be in this place. Or if you're running like what, a
yeah,
4 week block with Evan, is that kind of your
yeah.
typical?
So Evan knows me really well, and like I don't pick any of my numbers on squat. Uh, all my primary days are prescribed numbers
Okay.
from
Yeah.
now from now until nationals.
That's got to be freeing, because you
Yeah.
don't have to like self-assess after your last warm
Yeah.
up, like, should I add
Yep.
2.5? No, it's on the spreadsheet, right? So, yeah.
That's the way I like it, you know. That's what I'm very grateful for him for, um, with that kind of thing, because he doesn't do that for everybody, because he kind of does want them to gain some sort of like insight of their own and of their own like lifting. And I think about it sometimes too. I'm like, oh man, like, Evan always prescribes me my lifts. Like maybe I'm not a mature lifter at all because I don't really have the hindsight of like doing that myself, like picking the numbers myself on the day, learning how to pace myself in a block. But I have the idea of how to do it. He's always done it for me and it works very well when he plans it for me. Sorry if my dog is making noise, but
No, dude, not at all. Or maybe I just have bad hearing. But yeah, and I think it's different. It would be different if you were programming your numbers, but you were going to make your attempt selections on meet day. Whereas, like, he's also making your attempt selections. So really, there's never a point in, your process where that would fall on you right now, since he's doing the meet day coaching as well.
yeah. Yeah, it's great. I'm trying to think of what was I what were we what were we talking about?
Setting smaller goal, like
Oh
how
yeah,
you
yeah, do I
set
set?
goals for yourself.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, great. So, um, every week I try to keep in my, like on my week ones when it's like very light. Week twos are also pretty light for me. I try to keep in mind of what the end of block goals are.
Mhm.
Because I have it there in front of me. I know what I'm supposed to hit at the end of the block. I just try to keep that in my mind and nothing that I feel like Evan is again. his hand is really well at just picking numbers for me that just don't seem like too much of a stretch. Like I feel pretty
Mhm.
comfortable at most of the end of my blocks. Now in the next after this block, I'm going into uncharted territory where it's gonna really, be demanding of me. And then
Mhm.
that's where it's like I look at it, it's like, okay, I've had like a couple months where not necessarily I'm cruising, but I am. Like I
Mhm.
don't have to like bring it my all on a lift.
Sure.
Um, and with that, it's like I'm like harnessing all that energy that I've been just preserving for like those very big moments where things are a little more daunting. Because after this block, I'm going into some numbers that if I look at it right now, I'm like, that seems crazy. But I like the weekly check of the boxes, if that
Yeah.
makes sense. So if when I looked at the 4 month plan that he had written out, I was like, holy crap, like 270 squat, 160 bench, 295 deadlift, right? The deadlift was where I'm like, that'll probably be fine. I
Yeah.
hit I don't know what I hit. I think I hit just under 290, 287. I hit 644 and
Okay.
I think I hit
Isn't that
292 and a half.
292 and a half? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I hit so 295 is gonna be, not so crazy, right?
Yeah.
But like primarily we just don't like to like completely empty the tank on deads before a meet. Because I always just show up and I PR on the platform. So it's just
Yeah.
like it's more so just like a conditioning thing. But 270 squat and 160 bench is like right now it sounds crazy. Especially the squat. But what I do is I just look at it, I'm like, and it's like anything in life too, where, you might be like me recently, as I'm like looking for jobs, I can compare this to that too. Like I have no, for when I first was looking for jobs, I had no idea where I was gonna end up living.
Mhm.
And I have a girlfriend that I want to live with too. She is going to graduate school. I have no idea where she doesn't know where she's gonna end up getting into for grad school. So we try these things of like, okay, how can we plan our lives so that everything works out with the timing, right? Like I end up getting my job right when you start grad school and we're living in the same place. And it's like you just literally can't even think that far.
Yeah.
You have to look and it's like very, very overwhelming to think that far.
Oh,
You have to
yeah.
look at like what's the first steps? Well, do I even have a job offer to be
Right.
picking places?
Yeah. Yeah.
So let me start applying and getting some job offers. And that's like you just have to like lose all that like future mindset. And that's like the way I look at the lifting too. It's like when I look at that plan, 270 squat sounds crazy, but like what do I have this block? Oh, I have a 250 squat and I have like a 232 and a half triple. I can do that.
Mhm.
And I just every block it's just like little steps and I and it will just lead me up to that point. Like with proper programming, it should lead you up to that point. Um and not even I wouldn't say like with proper programming too. The proper programming definitely is like maybe I would say like 80% of it. But it's also just like how willing are you just able to just like not stress yourself over the very far future and accomplish the things that are like right in front of you. Um and then just see where it goes. Maybe I don't end up squatting 270 in the gym. I don't know. Maybe I don't end up hitting 160 bench. But I just focus, like you're saying, the small goals, right? That is primarily where I'm on, right? I think the only like long-term goal I have people have these goals. It's like, my long-term goal is to deadlift 700, or my long-term goal is to squat seven. It's like crazy, not crazy, but just like these numbers that people want to hit before they stop powerlifting. I don't have, I don't have that. I don't know. I
Yeah.
don't really have like a number that I have wanted for like I never started powerlifting with like, damn, I would really love to deadlift 800 pounds like before I die, right? Like I
Yeah.
don't never really had that. My long-term goal is to just be like 200 pounds and like good conditioning.
Yeah.
But
Just
that's not
can't
even
fit a
that
sweater
far.
because your neck's too thick for the sweater. That's the real goal. Yeah.
Yeah, like I feel like I have more long-term goals with like, oh, I want to get 20-inch arms. Like
Yeah. There you go.
that's kind of like where I'm at, where it's like, man, that is a huge goal of mine, right? But
Yeah. I don't
it's
think
like
you're
a
going to
fun
stay
goal.
in 82 with 20-inch arms, though. You're going to have to
I
move
don't-
up.
I
Yeah.
think so, yeah. That was like part of the reason I really started to resonate with bodybuilding when I found when I feel like I discovered it this summer that
Yeah.
just passed, 2024 summer. I discovered bodybuilding. Like I just really, really like the way bodybuilders talk about training and the way that they look and their approaches. Like I had never felt I kind of always just felt like the way I kind of felt misplaced in powerlifting in a
Mm.
way. If that's the best way I can describe it. With the way that I look at training. And maybe that's just the environment I was in, or maybe it's just, it could be a multitude of reasons. It's just like the media I consume with like powerlifting YouTubers, like very much on the number, like it's just all about numbers and you know, eh, like and the high competition too aspect. So like the very big power lifters, and not even like the ones that are like trendy, just like really strong guys like Rondell, Bob. They're very power lifted. They're very number oriented lifters where they're really number chasing, and then they're very, very, very competitive. Like very competitive. And I just never really resonated with that mindset of training. And then I had this summer where I was like, okay, I have some time to like really. I had like no, or I had an online class, and I was able to be home, and I had a lot of time on my hands, and I'm like, I want to learn about bodybuilding. I never really got into it, and just everything I looked at, just like all these people talking about the way they train, just like felt like it hit me to my core, to like the way I finally felt kind of like heard with the way I look at training. I was like, dang, like this whole sport, this whole thing was out here, and I didn't even know about it until now that like people think like this, right? Where it's
Yeah.
like, do don't care about the numbers, don't care about the weight, go in there, do the day by day of training, and just go and compete. And like a lot of those bodybuilders, like some of these guys, even in the Olympia, they are all fairly confident, but a lot of the times when you hear them talk on podcasts and stuff, they're like, "Oh, I didn't even think I was gonna get call outs, or I didn't
Yeah.
even think I was gonna, like even Ronnie Coleman on like his first Olympia that he won, he was like, "Oh, I just wanted to get fifth," you
Yeah.
know? And like that's kind of like the way that like I look at stuff too. And that's like a frowned upon way of looking at things. Like, why would you go into something without thinking you're gonna win? Well, it's not really all about that. It's like there's more to it than that. And like I'm more on like the party of like, why talk about something that you're gonna do? Like, why say I'm gonna be the best? I'm gonna be a national champion. I'm gonna be the greatest to do this or to do that, or I'm going to hit this number or I'm going to hit that, when you can just keep that to yourself work and do everything that you're supposed to do and like let that result happen and not steal yourself of that enjoyment. I mean, it's like a thing in psychology. I don't know specifically the studies or whatever, but if you constantly are talking about this thing that you're gonna do, you're like robbing yourself. You're almost like tricking your brain into thinking that you've like accomplished it already
Yeah.
because you're
And
like
so
hyping yourself up on this idea, and this idea is just like very romanticized in your brain of like I'm gonna do this thing when you haven't even done it yet. And when it does happen, whether it happens in the time frame or not that you want it, well, first of all, if it doesn't happen in the time frame that you want it, you're automatically gonna look at it when it does happen as being less than of what it was.
totally.
Not only that, it's like you're now like robbed yourself of the enjoyment of like doing that, right? Like because you've just been giving yourself like little hints of it over time. That was like the big thing with Evan and I is like uh to a certain extent I never like defended myself when he would not consider me as competition. Like I never talked back to him with it like, oh, like you're gonna have a run for your money or like just talk shit in general. I never did it. I would like run out of the gym like biting my tongue. Um, and I didn't know why. Like I kind of felt like I was like kind of like bitching out. I was like, man, I just didn't even stick up for myself, right? Like he's sitting there looking at the board at CCB like, oh yeah, like maybe he looked at me, he's like, maybe you'll get those numbers in April, but like in November I'm gonna take all of them, right? The total and whatnot.
Dude, I
And I'm
think you
like,
stand up for yourself by how you perform, you know.
yep.
Yeah, not by what comes out of your mouth, and
Yeah,
you ultimately.
exactly.
And I wonder if Evan was trying to motivate you in
He
in
definitely
that.
was.
Yeah, yeah.
He definitely was. He was trying to motivate himself more so, I think,
Okay. Yeah,
because he trains much harder when he has that like person he wants to be or this
yeah.
goal. He's very different. We're very polar opposites in that sense. Like he will have like these targeted individuals where it's like I want to beat this person, and it'll make him train harder.
Mhm.
Um, whereas like that doesn't happen to me at all. It doesn't matter what other people do to, it's not gonna make me train harder. Like I said, I tried that. I did try it. I tried it going into that ghost meet and it didn't work. It just did not work for me.